お願いします。So while we're on the subject, I thought I'll do a video about Uke. Okay? So many people have already looked into this by now, you know. In the information age, obviously information tends to flow, and that's a very, very good thing. And it can also be a bad thing, but actually overall, in my opinion, it's a very good thing. So this is a theme of videos about how to interpret your kata. Before I guess I go into the topic, a couple of ground rules, right? The first thing is the history of karate, right? Karate equals kata. Karate equals kata. The kata are golden. The kata, thanks to the Japanese/Okinawan culture, which is very, if anybody has done business with the Japanese people, you'll know that their attention to quality and statistical process control is pristine, right? Even today in their industry, they don't like to make any changes to an established process unless there's a very, very, very strong, compelling reason, and then you'll need like 20 managers to make a change. Such was the same culture applied to karate. The kata were handed down exactly as taught, exactly as instructed. So the kata are golden. The kata are what they were back in 1700, you know, or even earlier. If you look at Naihanchi, one of the oldest katas, still, you know, exactly as it is. How do I know that? I don't, but that's my theory. Okay, if you look at the other aspects, such as bunkai, bunkai is the interpretation of karate. We have to place an opponent near the practitioner of the kata. When we place that opponent, depending on where we place it, who we place, how many, you know, and so on, the interpretation can change, but the kata stays the same, okay? Therefore, what you'll find when you're approaching bunkai is that depending on who you ask, you may get a different answer. Okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean? You know, what does this mean? What does this mean? And what does any of them mean, right? Most instructors tend to place an opponent right in front of the technique, and basically your opponent is punching or kicking. That's it. Punching or kicking or grabbing. Grabbing less. Most of the time there's an incoming punch. And in most of our katas, that's what we get. We get a person that's slotted in who's going to punch us. So the move that we're going to be executing must be a block, and therefore the next move must be a counter punch. And now that opponent is dead, and we're going to the next one and so on. Okay. As we practice karate and kata more and more and more, and as we attain a state of less and less and less internal dialogue, and as we get more and more and more in tune with karate, then the kata starts to reveal itself to us, right? So I always think of kata as an incredibly highly encrypted zip file. If you were to open the zip file with a text editor, you just see a bunch of ASCII characters, and you try to interpret that. And then you might make sense of it. You might say, oh, look, here's a smiley face, and here's a plus sign, and that means something. A lot of the time, that's what we do when we look at kata, right? We try to interpret the encrypted format. We need to unzip the kata. We need to unzip the kata And the kata, which is only a couple of kilobytes, when we unzip that kata, it becomes terabytes, full of different folders, occupy the whole hard drive that we have. And then when we look into those different folders, we get different scenarios and how we can apply the kata to those different scenarios. It's only after we make the effort of diligent practice, attaining a quiet mind, etc., that we can start to listen to the kata and get an idea of what the intent might have been by the person who created the kata. Okay, so one of the things we look at today is uke. Okay, uke. If we analyze uke, there's a very simple physics explanation for how to interpret uke. Let's say we are doing Chudan Soto uke. Soto, I'm talking about Okinawan styles, okay? Not the shotokans changed from outward to from the outside or whatever, okay? So, Soto uke. Think about this. Let's say we are in Yoi. The reason most katas, let's say if you look at the Pinans by Itosu, right? All of them start with a Yoi position like this. I always interpret this position as, this or this, which is basically how we might be in the natural environment. We're not going to be like this in our natural environment waiting for the person to arrive, okay? We see that a lot in sports competition. In fact, as soon as the referee says go, both kata practitioners don't just stand like this, as the kata has taught them to, but the karate practitioners immediately going to Ju kumite, haya, like that, right? So, however, the kata explicitly, most kata explicitly tell us to start from, this position or this position or this position. Whether you made a fist or you didn't, let's say you're making eye contact with somebody who's angry at you. Now, why somebody is angry at you, that means you haven't practiced enough karate. But let's say we got to that stage, right? So if somebody is really looking at you and making eye contact and close by, whether you've tightened your fists or not is not going to be easily noticed by that person. So you might as well just tighten your fists, which is what Itosu is teaching us in Pinan series, okay? But you're not going to start like this, what we call fighting stance, and then try to engage the opponent, right? It's a bit like chess. If you haven't made a move yet, which is Yoi, that means you don't have any strengths, but you also don't have any weaknesses. The board is neutral. As soon as you make a move with a pawn, means as soon as you get into fighting stance, you might have a strength, but you also have a number of weaknesses that could be easily exploited. And that's what the Yoi position teaches us. Basically, start from neutral, okay? And then we'll figure out what's going on, okay? So that's kind of an important interpretation already of kata. And already at Yoi, we should be thinking very, very hard about what it means. It's not just starting of the kata, meaningless, entry to the kata, because the practitioners just felt like it should be in there. Every single second of a kata is wasted, precious space. It only has a few kilobytes of space to store the information in. Every single millisecond of the kata contains immense information that cannot be overlooked. I cannot state that enough. Okay? So, let's take a look at Soto uke as we were doing. From a Yoi position, Soto uke begins like this. We have what we typically call a preparation move, okay, this way. And then we have an outward move. Let's take a look at Uchi uke. Uchi Uke begins like this. We have a preparation move, and then we have an outward move. Okay? Let's take a look at Shuto Uke. We have a preparation move, and we have an outward move. Okay? Another thing, especially in Matsubayashi-Ryu, just to keep in mind is, while a lot of bunkai and techniques for, kumite techniques, scripted kumite techniques are taught to be blocks and punches and so on. If we go back and look at kata, which kata equals karate, everything else a little bit more questionable, okay? If we take a look at kata, what we see is there are hardly any uke. There are hardly any uke where the kata practitioner is stepping back. That is a big clue in unraveling how to approach uke. If you think about uke, most uke are stepping forward. Stepping forward. Okay? For example, I'm trying to think of an uke that steps back in kata, but I should have done my homework. Maybe there is one. But I'm talking Matsubayashi-Ryu, Okinawan styles here. Okay? Most of them step forward. Already in Pinan Shodan Hayam Sandan, at the end, right, we are introduced to stepping forward, Jodan Uke. And stepping forward, Jodan Uke. There are hardly any uke where we step back and we try to execute as a block and then we try to counterattack. That doesn't happen in karate. Okay? It's very important to understand that. Okay? So let's take a look at uke. All uke have something in common. There's a preparation move, what we call preparation move, heading back, and then there's an outward move. There's a preparation move, right, and an outward move. There's a preparation move, I should really do same foot, same hand, preparation move, and an outward move. And then there's a, so like this, there's a preparation move, right, and an outward move, okay? So all uke have that thing in common. What we tend to miss in karate, and we start teaching our young students or whoever, white belts, yellow belts, and so on, early on, is the preparation move is for balance, for strength building, etc. And the point of contact is with the outward move. So for example, a punch is coming in, therefore we do a preparation move. The punch still is continuing to come in, and then we intercept the punch and we block it like this with an outward move. That also is the reason why karate has obtained its reputation of being the iron rod, because as the whatever attack is coming, we're blocking it basically, okay? Here's a caveat. We should excel at being able to perform those blocking moves. We should have an iron body, and if we want to use any of these moves as blocking moves, we should be 100% able to do them such that the opponent will not be very happy. The opponent's body will not be very happy about having gone through that clash, okay? So that is a good thing to attain in karate. You don't want to be easily throwable and easily breakable, right? So you still have to have an elevated degree of fortitude, which is going to be useful for you. But here is the basic physics of this thing. So if there is an incoming attack, the incoming attack is not going to happen from any distance that is taught in sport karate. It's not going to happen from there. It's going to be right here. I call that threat level orange, okay? Basically, from here, the amount of distance that needs to be covered is at most an arm's length, right? Because the opponent has to be near me to do real serious damage. In order to do serious damage, the opponent can't be too far away and just punch and just make contact. That will be play karate, and I won't be damaged. Even if I'm hit, I won't be damaged. You know, your instructors may tell you, oh, you got hit, how terrible. The reality is nothing happened, right? In order to induce real damage, the opponent has to be much closer. And the middle of the punch should be, for the opponent attacking me, should be the point of contact. And then there is still a lot more to come, right? Therefore, I only have about half an arm's length at minimum and about an arm's length at maximum distance between the opponent, right, and myself. If the opponent decided to punch me quickly, right, especially a face punch, which is going to be much more critical than a gut punch, especially with my belly over here. Face punch, I don't have the time for any uke, I don't have the time to detect that the attack is coming, right? Now, I'm not talking about that I'm highly enlightened to the level that I can see things before they can happen at that level. Yes, sen no sen and all that, right? I'm not talking about that just yet. Okay, we're all striving for that, I know, but I'm giving you the basic physics of this thing. Okay, so after the detection has occurred that something physical is occurring, right? The opponent's arm or some limb or some part of the body is already coming towards me, right, is in motion. I don't have the time to go back, to use all my hips and everything, go back, do a perfect preparation move, and then start to go forward and intercept that attack. I don't have the time to do that. For anybody who thinks they have the time to do that, and if they don't, they should train harder, I say, I could be the opponent and I'll train harder to punch faster. The opponent will always win that contest, okay, always win. That is why when we look at kata, we have to look at it in the light of common sense, physics, etc., right? And what we find is that the uke is the backward move. 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 The backward move is the interception, okay? So if an attack is coming in, it's the backward move and the foot stepping forward, which allows us to put our bishop and our knight on the chessboard at appropriate positions to gain a position of advantage. The evasionary move, right, this way in Shuto Uke, this way in Soto Uke, right? The evasionary move, the initial move where the hands are going back are in fact the leaf going with the wind, the hair going with the grain, the log going with the stream, okay? So that is the important part about uke. And a lot of Western karate practitioners, once they realize this, and there have been many who have, then they change the translation from block to receiving technique, okay? It's not just a receiving technique either, because there's something at the end, right? So once the technique has been received, either from the attacker's inside or from the attacker's outside, right? Tai sabaki can be utilized in any direction. Then there's a follow-up. The follow-up is the attack. That attack is usually to the head or to some vulnerable part. So we have to think about our uke totally differently. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to go after the attacker's weapon, which is the limb, right? And then I'm going to try and counterattack the opponent's body, trying to get closer. First I start with the weapon and then I get closer. The thing about uke is I'm going to receive the weapon. I'm going to let the weapon slide past me. I'm going to gain a position of advantage stepping forward. I'm not going to be stepping back. I'm going to be stepping forward, right? And then the attacker's vulnerable parts, the face, the neck, etc., will be revealed. The attacker will have lost his chess move, and then I would strike. I would do either an arm lock, an arm bar, or strike. If my strike were if my strike were to fail, if my strike were to be blocked, then I could do something else, right? For example, in Pinan Shodan, we've got this, 1, 2, 3. The way we interpret 3 and 4, typically, the way it's taught is an attack comes in and then another attack comes in. Not correct, in my opinion, right? The first layer of that onion is I've evaded and I tried to finish. The attack didn't work, right? It was blocked. So now I can keep on going and finish, etc., etc., etc. The same thing is happening in Uke, where we would do this way. The attack has been evaded. The attack was coming to my face. Evaded. A face punch with a hammer fist, right? Elbow, face punch. 2 points of contact, right? The arm has already been evaded. I'm in a position of strength. Maybe I'm jamming the other arm, etc. But from here, elbow, face, okay? Hammer fist, back fist. Whatever is your poison, use it, fine. Sotoke, right? From here, evasion. The arm has already been evaded from here to the nose, right? So the uke, the primary function of the uke are not to block incoming attacks, but to act as the reception, the evasion, and the counterattack at the same time, already without a punch. Already without a punch. That's why a lot of kata may just finish with an uke. That's why in kata, a certain direction, a certain engagement will be finished with an uke without having to have a punch at the end. After that, we keep on going, right? That's Pinan Shodan. The uke is the attack itself. Thank you very much.